The prophecy had come true. Eugene Jr. could hardly believe his eyes, staring in disbelief at the carnage unfolding before him. They'd been fooled, tricked into believing the danger was truly over and that Choo Choo Charles was really gone, and buying into the foolish notion that he was the one and only killer train around. The deafening, wrenching shriek of scrap metal twisting and tearing was matched only by the inhuman screeching of the creature once known as the Terror of Aranearum. Choo Choo Charles, once defeated, had risen again and was locked in a deadly battle with two other monstrous locomotives. One caused the ground below to tremor before it came bursting up from beneath miles of tunnels buried beneath the tarmac. It wriggled like a gigantic worm, its huge jaws emitting a blood-curdling scream that made the windows of nearby buildings shatter into glass fragments. The Train Eater's multiple eyes locked onto Choo Choo Charles, who was distracted, already preoccupied with fighting another monstrosity that more closely resembled his own multi-legged appearance. Thomas.exe, a nightmarish version of the popular children's character Thomas the Tank, roared in pain as Charles's spider legs ripped apart his blue metalwork. Much like the Terror of Aranearum, Thomas.exe had grown multiple spindly legs, and the steam train that formed its central mass acted as a protective shell for the creature inside. But having once been a purely digital being, Thomas.exe wasn't as prepared for a physical fight now that it had been granted a real-world form. But Choo Choo Charles? He could fight. Suddenly, the Train Eater sped directly into Choo Choo Charles, colliding with such an impact that it drove both the spidery steam engines apart. Charles and Thomas.exe were both sent crashing to the street, crushing cars and smashing up sidewalks as their bodies were overturned. The Train Eater slithered up to Choo Choo Charles, intuiting that he was stronger and therefore a bigger threat. It disregarded the wounded Thomas.exe and reared up for a killing strike. Not long before all this madness unfolded, the people of Aranearum had been breathing a collective sigh of relief. After a lot of hard work and the help of an anonymous archivist, they had successfully managed to take down Choo Choo Charles once and for all. The part train, part tarantula that had terrorized the small island home had now been defeated, and they thought that that would be the death of Choo Choo Charles for good, but they were wrong. Of course, when a gigantic demon train is found dead on a tiny, previously unremarkable island, people might start to take notice. The press were soon flocking to Aranearum in droves to see if the story was true, or just a local legend taken a little too far. But as soon as they saw for themselves, the story started to spread like wildfire. And the further it reached, the more attention it garnered from some rather interested parties. The Terrestrial Rare Anomaly Investigation and Neutralization Agency, or TRAIN for short, had been keeping an eye on Aranearum for quite some time. They were a top-secret organization that dealt with the strange and inexplicable things that sometimes reared their ugly heads. Most of the investigations lead to nothing, like chasing down Bigfoot in the Himalayas, only to discover they've been hunting a prankster in a $20 costume from Spirit Halloween. But every now and then, they find something real, and real scary. Of course, the train agency couldn't move in while Charles was still terrorizing Aranearum. The Charles Mining Company, owned by the industrialist Warren Charles III, posed too much of a risk. He was a spiteful man, with his own obsessive interest in Choo Choo Charles. He could have exposed Train to the world if they'd stepped in and stopped Warren Charles III's schemes. But now, things had changed. Warren Charles III was now fortuitously out of the way. Choo Choo Charles himself had seen to that. The few surviving Charles Mining Company workers who joined Warren in his bizarre cult, devoted to worshipping the Terror of Aranearum, had all been rounded up and arrested, so Train were now free to head to their new destination, Aranearum Island. They sent an ambassador to negotiate terms with the surviving residents still living on the island. They were eager to return to their normal lives, now that Choo Choo Charles was defeated. And when Train offered to remove what remained of the part spider demon, part steam engine, the islanders thought they were getting a good deal. Under the cover of darkness, a swarm of Train agents arrived on Aranearum and worked tirelessly all through the night. By the time the residents of Aranearum awoke the next morning, the island had been picked clean. Any and all traces of Choo Choo Charles, all the cave drawings, monster eggs, and even Charles's body were gone. It was almost as if nothing had happened, except for one young man by the name of Eugene Jr. His grandfather, also called Eugene, had been the one to come up with the plan that the islanders used to defeat Charles in the first place, and his father, Paul, had been instrumental in helping the archivist take down the Terror of Aranearum for good. But to Eugene Jr., the lifelong fear he had of Choo Choo Charles hadn't gone, even though the island was rid of him. And playing on his mind was an old book of monster research his grandfather had left behind. Inside, there were a few charcoal rubbings of the many stone tablets underneath the island, showing an ancient species of spider-like demonic creatures terrorizing the island of Aranirum long ago. One of these spiders was Choo Choo Charles, but interestingly, there was a stone tablet that only Eugene had any record of. It showed a different scene, one depicting events not from the past but of the future. There was a spider housed in a strong metal shell to protect it, Choo Choo Charles. Then, alongside it, another similar creature that could have been a descendant or a copy. And there was also a third monster, a long underground burrower with many eyes across its body. Eugene Jr. was convinced that this was a prophecy of events still to come, and that the battle against Charles wasn't yet over. And now that Train had taken Charles and the monster eggs from the island, his concern had only gotten worse. But what could a super-secret organization want with a creature like Charles? And a broken one at that. Well, the Train agency hadn't been idle while they were waiting for the situation on Aranirum to die down. They'd been investigating a number of other cases involving unconfirmed reports of creatures similar to Choo Choo Charles that were rumored to be lurking around. The first they'd been made aware of after trawling through old internet forums. The stories told of a steam train that existed in a video game, one based on a popular children's character, but it had become corrupted through some unnatural means, making the digitized train come to life. It twisted and transformed into an abomination, stalking its way through cyberspace and pulling unsuspecting victims into its nightmarish game world. The one fortunate part was the creature didn't exist in the real world, only digitally, so Train agents had been able to isolate the rogue program and removed it from the internet, trapping it on a USB hard drive under the file name Thomas.exe. There was also another strange case they'd been looking into, this time of a creature that was very much real and dangerous too. It had all started when a handful of commuters had strangely gone missing on their way home from work. What was particularly strange about it was that not one of them left any trace behind. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. Train started looking deeper into this, quickly realizing just how many disappearances there had really been. Far more than they first thought, and all taking place at different subway stations along the various underground train tunnels that ran beneath the city on the mainland. By marking all the stations where the disappearances had happened on a map of their subway, they were able to come up with predictions as to where the next ones might happen. So they sent agents undercover to pose as ordinary commuters coming home late from office jobs. And what those agents saw shocked them beyond belief. There was a monster living in the subway tunnels. It was a huge, fleshy monstrosity the size of a subway train. Dotted all over its sides were multiple wide eyes, staring lidless as it came to the platform. The entire front was taken up by a huge mouth that showed off multiple rows of dull teeth when fully opened all the way. There was even a fleshy growth in its mouth, almost like the uvula at the back of a person's throat, but it was in the shape of a human being, a way to lure its prey onto the tracks so it could eat them, like the light from an anglerfish. The train agents quickly came to the disturbing conclusion that those missing commuters hadn't disappeared at all. They'd been devoured by this terrifying train eater. By the time they received word that Choo Choo Charles had been dealt with, the train eater was still at large. Train agents had been keeping tabs on its movements, but the creature was enormous and moved as fast as a subway train. The best they could do was track it and pull strings to shut down certain stations where it frequently came to eat. Of course, this couldn't go on forever. Commuters still needed to get home after their long days of working, and the train agency couldn't allow a dangerous monster like the train eater to keep snacking on unsuspecting subway passengers waiting at the station. What the train agency desperately needed was something that could take down the train eater once and for all. And now that they had successfully gathered up the remains of Choo Choo Charles and all the monster eggs from Aranirum, and they had Thomas.exe trapped on a hard drive, this meant they had options. It was a risky endeavor, trying to use either one of these dangerous locomotive monstrosities to take down another, but time was running out. The press had already revealed Choo Choo Charles' death to the whole world. People were aware of monsters like him and would be on the lookout. And if they discovered the train eater too, then the fact the creature was still at large would be a bad look on the agency. None of them wanted to look as if they'd stood by and done nothing. They got to work on two separate projects, one with the goal of reviving Choo Choo Charles so he could be used to stop the train eater. Meanwhile, the other was attempting to harness one of the monster eggs taken from the caves under Aranirum. The hypothesis from a few trained scientists was if they could somehow combine the digital Thomas.exe entity with a physical spider-trained body, then it could be programmed like a robot to carry out the agency's orders. Both teams worked tirelessly, bending the laws of physics and nature to try to achieve their goals. The first project's team thought they'd had a breakthrough with advanced cloning, hoping they could make an exact copy of Choo Choo Charles, but their creations didn't survive very long. The mixture of ancient Spider Beast DNA and red metal steam locomotive parts kept fusing in the wrong ways, constantly leaving them back at square one. Similarly, the other group was encountering difficulties of its own. Transferring a digital creature like Thomas.exe into a physical body was much easier said than done. It was made all the more difficult by just how insidious Thomas.exe was. Every time it was booted up, it kept trying to trap scientists within its game world, where it could hunt them to its twisted delight. But eventually, both projects made a breakthrough, one that would at first be celebrated and then instantly regretted when trained scientists realized what they'd done. They'd been so busy hunting these multiple terrifying train creatures for so long, and now trying to recreate them to take out the Train Eater, that the train agency had made one crucial oversight. They had no way of containing the monstrous locomotives once their experiments achieved unexpected success. But little had they realized that Thomas.exe was also partly to blame. The digitized demon train had been patiently waiting on the hard drive the agency had trapped him on, and the moment it had been reconnected to their computer network, it wasted no time spreading like a virus onto the entire train agency system. Thomas.exe had corrupted everything, and now that it had been successfully implanted into a spidery train body, it was still in control. It shut down the train agency's whole system, causing a massive panic that allowed the monster to break free. It had been patient, idly learning from the scientists as they discussed the Train Eater feeding on civilians. That had given Thomas.exe an idea. Now it had a real body. It felt itself drawn to the nearest population center and began scuttling its way toward the city. At the same time as one terrifying train was making an escape, another had been revived from the brink of death. The computerized chaos caused by Thomas.exe had inadvertently triggered an electromagnetic mechanism that restored Choo Choo Charles to full health. In a state of pure, unstoppable rage, Charles had began tearing through the train agency's secret headquarters. The dying thing he remembered was being bested by the pesky islanders back on Aranirum, and his fury at the defeat was now being directed at the scientists who'd returned him to life. Unleashing a torrent of destruction to everything around him, Charles's attention was soon caught by a strange feeling. He could sense something, another spider monster born from one of the eggs like he was, but it was corrupted somehow, infected, and heading toward the city. Choo Choo Charles had a new target for his rage and hurriedly crawled after the other half-spider, half-steam train. Meanwhile, back in the city, Eugene Jr. had been trying to convince anyone that would listen of the impending danger. He'd been studying the prophecy left behind on the stone tablet and recorded by his grandfather. As far as he understood it, the human race would be set upon by three monsters, all attacking from different places. One would be coming up from below, emerging from a nest underground. Another was returning from beyond the grave, brought back to life by unnatural means. And the next creature was coming from beyond the physical world, almost like a spirit, or a computer virus maybe. Although he didn't know their names, Eugene Jr.'s prophecy was indeed referring to Choo Choo Charles, the Train Eater, and Thomas.exe. Unfortunately, nobody had heeded his warnings. They wrote him off as just a crazy conspiracy theorist. People were startled when a small earthquake seemed to rock the city. They panicked for a brief moment before the tremors ultimately passed. Of course, nobody noticed the large hole that had been burrowed just beyond the city limits, allowing something to dig down into the subway system below. Thomas.exe was on the hunt, searching for prey the way the Train Eater did, clawing at layers of dirt as it tunneled deeper. Little did it realize the multiple-eyed monster had lived in the subway tunnels for so long, it had learned to sense the vibrations of oncoming trains, and it could tell when it detected unfamiliar movements that there was something new lurking in its tunnels. The Train Eater sped through the subway, seeking out this intruder in its habitat. It didn't take long for one of the creature's many eyes to spot something crawling around its tunnels. It was a blue steam engine with spindly gray spider legs and an unnerving smiling face stretching out from within. Wasting no time, the Train Eater navigated the tracks and rushed its way back around so it could speed straight into Thomas.exe and bash it like a battering ram. The next tremor felt by all the citizens was much larger and seemed to be rising up from somewhere underground. People who'd been in the subway stations had seen what was happening and started to pour out onto the sidewalk as they tried to escape, all screaming in fear about the two monsters in the tunnel. Nearby, Eugene Jr. overheard their cries. Oh no, it was too late. Rammed by the Train Eater, Thomas.exe came bursting out from underneath the main street, sending huge chunks of asphalt and dirt spewing out like a volcanic eruption. The Train Eater had locked its huge jaws around the half-tarantula, half-tank engine before spitting it out as the pair came above ground. Onlookers screamed and ran for their lives, trying to get as far away as they could and fast. But as they turned the nearest corner hoping they'd be safe on the next street, they were met with the horrifying sight of another locomotive monster. Choo Choo Charles had caught up, and he wasn't about to let a pair of pretenders steal his top spot as the scariest steam train. Seeing Thomas.exe right ahead, Charles made a charge straight for the blue engine, racing into a battle royale between the three terrifying trains. The train eater was bearing down on Choo Choo Charles, ready to be the first of the monsters to defeat another. Suddenly, before it could land a nasty bite, a scuttling blue shape barged right into the train eater, knocking it aside and giving Choo Choo Charles enough time to get himself back upright. Retaliating from the earlier attack, Thomas.exe was angrily crawling at the train eater, poking its many eyes to reduce the creature's vision. Charles started coming toward it with a growl, which Thomas.exe noticed and started to flee. It knew it was outmatched against Choo Choo Charles. The injuries it had already sustained were enough evidence of that. Leaving the wounded train eater lying in the street, Thomas.exe scuttled up the side of a nearby skyscraper. It plunged its huge spider legs through the walls and the windows, scraping tons of brickwork and glass out, causing them to fall on Choo Choo Charles, who was hot on Thomas.exe's trail. The falling debris did little to deter the more experienced killer train. He snarled angrily as he gave chase, determined to catch up to the blue train. Just before Thomas.exe could reach the roof of the skyscraper, something snagged at its back legs. Choo Choo Charles had grabbed it, his own spidery limbs proving much stronger than the newly formed ones on Thomas.exe. With all his strength, Charles pulled Thomas.exe away from the surface of the building, detaching each one of its gripping legs before hurling the pretender back down to the ground. Plummeting down through the air, Thomas.exe gave a vindictive, vitriolic peep of its whistle, the shrill sound of shattering glass. From below, the injured train eater looked up with its remaining eyes and saw the spidery steam train falling right toward it. Both collided, crashing into a mangled mess that left a huge crater in the sidewalk, with both defeated trains lying in the center. Atop the building, Choo Choo Charles let out a bone-chilling roar. Not only had he won, he was back, and nobody could stop him going on a vengeful rampage across the city.